They cornered the farmer, guns raised, confident he was an easy victim. But they never imagined that his heavily pregnant wife was watching their every move through the scope of a sniper rifle. What happened next stunned an entire gang of ruthless criminals, leaving them scrambling in fear. How could a seemingly gentle, expectant mother become their greatest nightmare? Listen to the full story to discover the shocking truth and thrilling outcome. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories like this. Your support helps us share even more unforgettable adventures. Morning sunlight spilled across the rolling hills of Pleasant Valley, Oregon, illuminating the well-kept orchards that stretched out in carefully planted rows. Tessa Holloway, 8 months pregnant, stood by the kitchen window of her modest farmhouse, her green eyes scanning the property as she sipped a cup of herbal tea. Outwardly, there was nothing to mark Tessa as anyone other than a gentle, expectant mother. Her wavy brown hair, tied back in a loose ponytail, swayed slightly as she moved about the kitchen, and her faded overalls suggested a life devoted to tending the land. Yet something in her gaze hinted at an intensity beneath the surface, a quiet vigilance few around her truly understood. On this particular morning, Tessa's husband, Mark Holloway, was already out by the orchard's edge, checking irrigation lines that ran between apple trees heavy with fruit. At 36, Mark had the lean, muscular build of a farmer used to hard work in early mornings. He waved when he caught her eye through the window. Tessa returned the gesture, smiling softly. She set down her mug and turned up the volume on a small radio that rested on the windowsill. Another farm in the county was targeted last night, the newscaster's voice crackled. Local authorities believe the Greyhorn gang may be behind recent arson attacks and property destruction. Tessa's hand absently drifted to her belly. The unborn child shifted inside her, and she felt a rush of protective instinct. Beyond her calm exterior was a woman who had once been known, in a war-torn land halfway across the world, by a name that struck fear into the hearts of her enemies. The Shadow of Kabul, they had called her, an elite counter-sniper responsible for saving countless lives during her tours in Afghanistan. Now she lived quietly as Tessa Holloway, looking forward to motherhood and the simpler life she and Mark had built on the farm. Just then, a knock on the screen door announced Judy Ellis, their neighbor, who walked in carrying a small basket of fresh eggs. Judy was in her late 40s, with streaks of gray in her hair that she wore proudly. Her face, usually bright with cheer, looked worried. "Tessa," Judy said, placing the eggs on the counter, "word is that the Greyhorn gang has been spotted just a few miles south. Paul and I heard they were on the Murphy place last week, threatening to burn the barn if the Murphys didn't pay them protection money." Tessa kneaded dough on the kitchen island with steady hands. "They've been inching closer, haven't they?" she replied, her voice level. Judy nodded grimly. "Yes, the sheriff's been upping patrols, but there are so many miles of farmland. It's impossible to be everywhere at once. I don't mean to alarm you, especially with you so close to your due date." "We'll be okay," Tessa said gently. "Mark and I have taken a few precautions. You and Paul should do the same." Judy wasn't sure what Tessa meant by precautions, but she took comfort in the younger woman's calm, reassuring tone. She left soon after, promising to check back later in the week. Behind the farmhouse's cozy decor lay carefully concealed layers of security. Tessa had quietly reorganized the home's layout to provide clear lines of sight from every window. A series of carefully installed hidden locks and latches meant the doors could be barricaded at a moment's notice. An old gun cabinet in the living room held a state-of-the-art surveillance system, its monitor discreetly tucked behind the glass of what appeared to be a display of family heirlooms. None of the neighbors knew Tessa's real history. They saw only a capable farm wife with a sweet disposition. Occasionally, Paul Ellis teased Mark about how lucky he was to have a wife who could manage the orchard's books, bake bread, and still keep pace with daily chores well into her pregnancy. Mark would just smile and nod, aware that Tessa's unassuming veneer was a small fraction of the truth. By midday, Tessa had finished her routine property checks, an activity that included far more than simply walking among the rows of apple trees. She paused near an old oak that grew by a shallow creek, surveying the surroundings. The vantage points, the angles, the possible lines of approach. She mentally cataloged them all. The orchard for Tessa was more than a source of income. It was a territory she understood with the precision of someone who had once scanned hostile terrains through the scope of a rifle. Mark, returning from a supply run to town, parked the truck near the barn and approached. The feed store's abuzz with stories of another fire set last night, near Willow Bend, he said, his expression serious. Everyone is on edge, Tess. You think they'll come here soon? She asked, voice steady. Mark glanced around, taking in the orchard, the outbuildings, the fences. I hope not, but these criminals have a pattern. They pick on people who seem isolated. They won't find such easy pickings here if they do. Tessa nodded. She remembered a phrase from her military training, never wait to be cornered. She and Mark had quietly prepared for various scenarios. While most of the region's farmers simply relied on hope and the local sheriff, Tessa and Mark had set up advanced motion sensors along the perimeter of their land. A private satellite phone sat in a locked compartment inside the house, along with documents that provided Tessa's background if they ever needed to prove her credentials. That evening, Tessa cooked a simple dinner of roast chicken, vegetables, and homemade bread. The act of cooking helped calm her, though her mind constantly drifted to the escalating troubles in the area. After dinner, the couple sat on their front porch, sipping tea as dust settled over Pleasant Valley. A battered pickup truck rumbled down the gravel road beyond their fence line. It paused for a moment, headlights shining into the orchard before peeling away into the twilight. Mark's jaw tightened. We've had more strange vehicles passing by in the last week than in the entire year before, he muttered. They're definitely scouting. Tessa remained silent, her hand resting on her round belly. She could feel the baby's gentle stirring, as though in response to the heightened tension in the air. In those quiet moments, she flashed back to deserts on the other side of the world, rooftops and dust swirling under an unforgiving sun, the weight of a sniper rifle cradled in her arms as she watched for threats. She had never imagined she would need those skills again, especially not in her peaceful home in Oregon. But life had taught her that danger could appear anywhere, and she refused to be unprepared. Night settled fully, and the only sounds were the whisper of leaves in the wind and an occasional hoot of an owl. Tessa and Mark stayed on the porch longer than usual, each lost in their own thoughts, yet united in resolve. They would not run. They would not cower. By the time they went inside, a plan had taken firmer shape between them. The Greyhorn Gang, or any criminals who thought they could bully their way into dominating the farmland, would learn soon enough that the Holloways were anything but helpless. The next day, Tessa moved with purpose through her usual routine. She washed dishes, organized the farmhouse pantry, and sorted mail. She paused to listen to the radio update about yet another suspicious fire 2 counties over. She crouched down, rummaging through a locked chest at the foot of her bed, her belly making the movement awkward. From inside, she withdrew a small case. Within it lay a custom rifle, lightweight, adapted for her changed center of gravity, and fitted with a high-end scope. While she hoped never to use it, she methodically checked its components. Every piece remained in flawless condition. She whispered to herself, "You stay safe," then directed her gaze downward, speaking both to her child and to the swirling memories of her past. Within a week, farmers from neighboring properties reported missing equipment, strange footprints, and cut fences. Tension rose throughout the valley. Some families packed up and left, fearing for their safety. The sheriff, stretched thin, warned people to be vigilant. Late one night, a faint beep from the monitoring system woke Tessa. She slid out of bed without disturbing Mark and glanced at the security screen hidden behind the gun cabinet's glass. The faint glow revealed multiple heat signatures crossing the western corner of their property line. Too large to be deer, too organized to be random wanderers. She woke Mark with a gentle shake. "They're testing our perimeter," she said softly, her heartbeat accelerating. Together, they watched as the shapes moved methodically, searching, pausing, and moving on again. But eventually, as though they found nothing of interest, the intruders slipped away. Tessa exhaled. "They're looking for signs of resistance," she murmured. "They'll be back." Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll be ready," he promised. A soft drizzle fell over Pleasant Valley, turning the dirt roads slick and the orchard soil muddy. The Greyhorn Gang had grown increasingly bold, leaving threats and demands at farmsteads closer and closer to the Holloway's property. Farmers spoke in hushed tones about meeting the gang's demands. Pay them or risk losing everything in a mysterious fire. But Tessa knew better. Once you gave in to extortion, the demands only grew. She and Mark made quiet visits to neighbors, encouraging them to hold firm. Yet many were too frightened. One afternoon, as Tessa was resting on the couch, her back aching from late pregnancy, Mark dashed in, breathless from a run across the muddy fields. "They're at Judy and Paul's place," he said, voice tight with worry. "The gang. At least half a dozen armed men." Tessa swung her feet to the floor. "We can't leave them alone," she said, eyes narrowing. "How far along are they?" "I saw their trucks from the ridge above the orchard. They're probably already trying to intimidate Paul." Paul Ellis, a tall but gentle soul, had voiced strong opposition to paying the gang any kind of fee. Judy was outspoken too, though she had confided to Tessa how terrified she was whenever she heard a strange sound at night. Now the threat had arrived at their doorstep. Tessa moved with surprising agility for someone so far along. She retrieved her custom rifle and a small earpiece. Mark hurried to open a locked chest that contained a bulletproof vest designed to accommodate Tessa's pregnancy. He helped her strap it on, wincing at the look of determination in her eyes. "You sure about this, Tessa?" he asked softly. He knew the question was almost rhetorical. Once Tessa set her mind to protecting others, little could dissuade her. She placed a reassuring hand against his cheek. "These men are counting on fear to keep everyone silent. They won't expect a woman like me to respond." Mark handed her a small two-way radio. "I'll stay here to keep watch through our surveillance feed and coordinate with the sheriff. Please be careful." Tessa nodded and slipped out into the drizzle, rifle slung over her shoulder. She moved quickly along a path that ran parallel to the road, staying behind the tree line to avoid detection. The orchard gave way to a gentle hill that led toward the Ellis farm, where she could see the outline of the barn in the family's small white farmhouse. At the edge of Paul's cornfield, Tessa paused, raising the rifle to her eye to look through its scope. She saw two battered pickup trucks parked haphazardly near the barn. 4 men stood in front of the farmhouse porch, rifles casually in hand, while 2 others prowled around the barnyard, occasionally kicking equipment or tossing supplies onto the ground. Tessa recognized the posture of armed men who believed they held complete power. The gang's self-assured ringleader, a stocky man in a leather jacket, had Paul by the collar, raising a fist. Judy hovered nearby, shouting for them to leave her husband alone. The ringleader sneered, "Pay up, or you and your neighbors can watch everything burn." Without warning, a shot rang out. It didn't strike a person. Instead, it hit the metal bed of one of the pickups, the sudden clang echoing through the rain. The men spun around, startled, searching the surroundings. From her hidden vantage point, Tessa chambered another round. Her heart thumped, but her hands were steady. Muscle memory from years ago taking over. Another shot blasted through the drizzling air, pinging off the hood of the second truck. Sparks flew, and the men ducked. "Who's out there?" roared one of the armed thugs, swinging his rifle toward the hillside. They couldn't see anything but gray sky, dripping leaves, and the gentle slope that vanished into orchard land. "Drop your weapons," came Tessa's voice, amplified by a small device she had set up near a fence post. The men twisted their heads, trying to locate the source. "If you harm Judy or Paul Ellis, you'll wish you had never set foot on this farm." The ringleader, teeth bared, tried to put on a show of defiance, but his bravado faltered. "You come out here and face us, coward!" A third shot rang out, this time snapping the barrel off the ringleader's rifle with uncanny accuracy. The weapon clattered to the porch. The men stared at it in disbelief. "I'm not the one who should be worried," Tessa's voice echoed again. "Leave, now!" Beads of sweat rolled down the ringleader's face, though the rain was still falling. He stumbled back, motioning for his men to retreat. Before they jumped into the trucks, one spat onto the ground. "This isn't over," he shouted, trying to save face. In a flash, they were gone, tires spinning mud as they tore down the road. Tessa remained in her hiding spot for several moments, scope scanning for any stragglers. Satisfied, she exhaled, feeling the baby shift as if reacting to her elevated pulse. She placed a hand over her belly, murmuring, "Just hang in there, little one. Mama's got this." At the farmhouse, Judy rushed to Paul, checking him over for injuries. Then both of them peered into the rain-soaked horizon, mystified by their rescuer. Tessa circled around, eventually approaching them from the side of the barn. By then, Judy had spotted her. "Tessa?" she called. Are you all right? Paul stared at the rifle in Tessa's hands. Realization spread across his face. He put two and two together. Did you? Were you the one who fired those shots? Rain pattered on the barn's metal roof, and Tessa lowered her head. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, she said quietly. It was the quickest way to get them to back off. Judy's eyes widened. But how did you... I mean, Paul rubbed his bruised collarbone. I've never seen marksmanship like that outside of a movie. And you're 8 months pregnant. Tessa gave a small shrug. I used to be a counter sniper, long time ago. Suddenly, the hushed rumors about Tessa's mysterious abilities began to crystallize. Judy and Paul, though stunned, were also profoundly relieved. You saved our lives, Judy managed. I don't know how to thank you. Tessa smiled gently. We look out for each other, right? That's what neighbors do. It wasn't long before the wail of sirens cut through the drizzle. Sheriff Calvin Turner and two deputies arrived, lights flashing. After hearing a frantic call from Mark, they'd rushed to the Ellis farm. The sheriff listened to Paul's account of the confrontation, eyebrows arching when he heard about the sharpshooter who drove off the Greyhorn gang. Tessa stepped forward and introduced herself, calmly explaining that she'd fired warning shots to protect her neighbors. Sheriff Turner took off his hat, scratching his head. You're telling me you managed to disable these guys with just a couple of bullets aimed at their trucks and rifles? Tessa nodded. Yes, sir. I didn't want to hurt anyone if I didn't have to, but they were threatening the Ellis family. One of the deputies, a woman named Nicole Easton, looked Tessa up and down, her gaze settling on Tessa's rounded belly. I don't even know what to say, Nicole muttered, half in awe. Sheriff Turner sighed. They won't give up easily. This gang has backing. We've suspected they're financed by bigger players who want to force out local farmers, but I never expected them to be met with someone of your training. Tessa offered a humble shrug. I'm just protecting my home. I'd appreciate if we can keep my background off the record for now. I don't want a spotlight on me or the baby. Turner hesitated, then nodded. Understood. We'll report that an unknown sharpshooter intervened. But Tessa, he paused, meeting her gaze earnestly. This is bigger than just one farm. You might have drawn a line in the sand that the gang won't take kindly to. Tessa's eyes flashed with steely resolve. I'm aware. Word spread fast around Pleasant Valley. Whispered stories circulated of how the heavily armed Greyhorn gang had been sent running by a single unseen shooter. Some folks took it as a sign of hope, while others grew more fearful, convinced the gang would return in force. Mark, Tessa, Judy, and Paul held a small gathering in the Ellis' kitchen that evening. The tension was palpable. We could try to rally the other farmers, Mark suggested, sipping a cup of coffee. Show them it's possible to stand up to these bullies. Judy pressed her lips together. We can try, but if half the folks around here already want to leave, they might not be willing to risk what you risked today. Paul, a protective arm around Judy, nodded. We can't do this alone either. The sheriff is good, but he only has so many deputies. This gang has money, manpower, who knows what else. Tessa listened, occasionally stroking her belly, her mind racing. She considered the training she had received in Afghanistan. The emphasis on community defense, using local knowledge to outsmart a stronger foe. Despite the adrenaline of earlier, she felt an undercurrent of conviction. The farmland was worth defending, not just for her own family, but for everyone in Pleasant Valley. This goes beyond me being able to shoot a rifle, she said after a moment. It's about coordination, communication. We can't just rely on me or the sheriff. If people work together, share information, set up mutual defenses, we can make this valley impenetrable. Mark placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Tessa knows what she's talking about. She has experience in places a lot more dangerous than this. They spent the next hour discussing everything from how to organize a phone tree among the farmers to setting up basic perimeter alarms using inexpensive motion sensors. Judy jotted down notes, determined to pass the information along during the next community meeting. In the glow of the kitchen lamp, their determination forged a small circle of resolve. Tessa felt the baby shift again, a reminder that time was running short. She hoped the child would be born into a safer environment than the one they faced now. The next day, Tessa and Mark oversaw the repair of a fence the gang had damaged on their last scouting attempt. Trucks rumbled along the dirt road more frequently, occasionally slowing near the Holloway property. Tessa made no attempt to hide her watchfulness, standing near the barn with a shotgun visible in her arms. Let them see that this farm was no easy target. That evening, Judy called with news of more sightings of suspicious vehicles lingering near other properties. They might be coordinating a larger assault, she said anxiously. Who knows what they'll do if they band together in bigger numbers? Tessa's mind flitted to images of old missions, planning infiltration routes under the cloak of darkness. The Greyhorn gang might attempt the same strategy, especially now that they realized the land wasn't unprotected. Thank you for letting me know, Tessa told Judy. We'll be on full alert. After hanging up, she found Mark in the living room, reviewing footage from their home security cameras. He glanced up. Think we should contact your old unit? He asked quietly. She pursed her lips. They're halfway across the world, and if we do that, we risk drawing a different kind of attention, plus it'll take too long. No, this is our fight, Mark. Our neighbors are our best allies. He nodded, not entirely surprised by her response. Tessa had never been one to rely on others when she felt she could handle things herself. Yet he also knew that her pregnancy brought an extra layer of vulnerability, whether she admitted it or not. As they prepared for bed, Tessa's mind simmered with tactical possibilities, ranging from how to use the orchard's natural layout as cover to which routes the gang might take if they attacked. She fell asleep after midnight, uneasy yet resolute, hoping that soon Pleasant Valley might stand as one against the looming threat. Word Count Part 2, Farm Wailen, 370 words. 3 days after Tessa's warning shot sent the Greyhorn gang fleeing from the Ellis farm, the hush that settled over Pleasant Valley felt ominous. Farmers reported no new sightings, but the lack of information only heightened Tessa's concerns. She recognized the tactic. Criminals often pulled back to re-strategize after encountering unexpected resistance. True to their word, Judy and Paul spread Tessa's suggestions about mutual defense throughout the valley. Within a short time, small groups of neighbors began forming a loose network of watchful eyes. They carried walkie-talkies or kept their phones charged to alert each other at the first sign of trouble. Some farmers installed simple motion sensor lights around barns and sheds. Others, bolder now, left their porch lights on all night and organized patrol shifts along back roads. Mark busied himself with finalizing structural reinforcements around the Holloway farm, double-checking that crucial vantage points remained unobstructed. He admired how Tessa, despite her advanced pregnancy, refused to slow down. She spent hours working on a digital map of the area, uploading vantage points and lines of sight where local farmers could place watchers. This is so they understand how to cover each other, Tessa explained, tapping the screen. If the gang tries a nighttime assault on one farm, the neighbors on either side can respond quickly. She had also drafted an emergency signal plan using the simplest form of communication, the honking of tractor horns. If phone lines or electricity went down, the distinct blasts of a tractor horn from each farm could travel miles in the still countryside, effectively relaying an alarm. Late one afternoon, Tessa picked up the phone to hear Judy's shaky voice on the line. There's a convoy of 3 black SUVs creeping down County Road 22. Paul says they're heading your way next. Tessa's pulse quickened. Stay inside, lock your doors, and keep me updated. She hurried to find Mark, who was in the workshop behind the barn repairing a broken fence latch. They're coming, she said simply. Mark set down his tools and swallowed. All right, let's do this. On and on, Mom. They went inside to activate the farm's camera system, a mosaic of vantage points showing everything from the orchard rows to the main road. Sure enough, 3 dark SUVs appeared on the feed, crawling slowly past the perimeter. Inside the lead vehicle was a figure Tessa had seen once before through her scope, the ringleader she had disarmed on Paul's porch. He looked as though he were scanning the property for signs of movement. Suddenly, the SUVs turned up the driveway, halting a few yards from the barn. 6 men stepped out, armed. 2 more remained behind, presumably as drivers. The leader, the same stocky man with a leather jacket, cupped his hands around his mouth. Mark Holloway, we hear you've been giving folks big ideas about not cooperating. Why don't you come on out so we can discuss a better arrangement? In the farmhouse, Tessa and Mark exchanged a glance. She positioned herself by a back window, rifle in hand. Mark moved to the front door, stepping onto the porch. We don't want any trouble, Mark called out, arms raised to show he wasn't holding a weapon. But we won't be bullied either. The ringleader scoffed, advancing a few steps with two men flanking him. Bullying? We're just offering protection. You see, no one's barn burns if they pay the right price. Mark clenched his jaw. We don't need your protection. Sorry, that's so? The ringleader's mouth twisted into a sneer. Your little sharpshooter friend isn't going to scare us off this time. One of the armed men leveled his rifle at Mark. Another started circling wide, eyes scanning the orchard for a hidden sniper. Inside the farmhouse, Tessa carefully set her scope on the man threatening Mark, her breathing measured despite the adrenaline surge. Not yet, she thought. Last chance, Holloway, the ringleader barked. We settle this now. You pay up, or we decide this entire orchard would look better in ashes. Mark's gaze flicked toward the house, heart pounding. I'll never pay. This is our home, and we won't hand it over to some gang. The ringleader laughed darkly, raising a signal to his men. Have it your way. He gestured for one man to advance, but the orchard was far from undefended. Tessa exhaled slowly and took aim. One man had strayed too close to the barn, within line of sight from the living room window. She squeezed the trigger, sending a bullet precisely into the rifle in his hands, ripping it away from him. The man yelped as the weapon clattered to the gravel. Pandemonium erupted. The ringleader snarled, barking orders to fan out. Tessa took another shot, this time knocking the pistol out of a second man's grip. No one could figure out where the shots were coming from. Mark ducked behind a porch column, shouting, "This is your final warning. Leave our land." The men retreated behind the SUVs, but they weren't fleeing yet. They opened fire on the farmhouse in sporadic bursts. Bullets cracked into wooden porch posts and shattered a front window. Tessa crouched low, shifting to a corner where she could line up a third shot. She felt the baby shift. She whispered a calming promise. Through the chaos, the orchard remained eerily serene. Then from the distance, another sound pierced the air. Tractor horns. Judy and Paul Ellis, along with other neighbors, had arrived at the edges of the property, broadcasting their presence. They might not be armed to the teeth, but they were there, letting the gang know the Holloways weren't alone. A shot from Tessa's rifle knocked out a tire on the lead SUV, blocking the other vehicles behind it. One final round destroyed a second SUV's engine block, steam hissing into the cool evening air. The ringleader and his men realized they were pinned. They could not proceed without risking more casualties. Meanwhile, neighbors' headlights appeared in the distance, an impromptu show of unity. With a frustrated roar, the ringleader signaled a retreat. The men scrambled back into the least damaged SUV, one of them hastily radioing for help. As the vehicles backed down the driveway, one car's rim sparked along the gravel, a testament to Tessa's precise shot. When the gang had gone, Mark emerged shaking with residual adrenaline. Tessa carefully set her rifle aside and joined him on the porch, ignoring the shattered glass. A wave of relief coursed through her, though she stayed on high alert in case they returned. Neighbors arrived in pickup trucks and tractors, headlights washing over the wounded barn and bullet-riddled porch. Judy ran up, hugging Tessa, tears in her eyes. "We heard the shots," she said, voice trembling. "We did what you told us, honked the tractor horns, and came as soon as we could." Paul, breathless, surveyed the scene. "You two all right?" Mark nodded, massaging the side of his neck where a splinter of wood had nicked him. "Thanks to Tessa's marksmanship and your support, we're okay." "Not just me," Tessa corrected softly, scanning the group of concerned farmers. "We all stood together." Sheriff Turner arrived minutes later with two more squad cars. He took in the bullet casings, the shot-out SUVs left behind, and the shaken but unhurt neighbors. Shaking his head in amazement, he stated, "No one's going to believe how a pregnant woman and a handful of farmers held off a gang like this. But you did." A deputy cuffed one gang member who had been left behind, wounded in the leg. The injured thug glared but said nothing as he was helped into the squad car. Judy, standing beside Tessa, asked, "Do you think they'll come back with more?" The sheriff expelled a deep breath. "Maybe, but we've got enough evidence and eyewitness accounts now. We'll coordinate with state police, set up roadblocks. We'll also send out bulletins. They won't be free to roam like before." In the following days, Pleasant Valley underwent a subtle but profound transformation. Buoyed by their successful defense, the farmers grew resolute. They reinforced each other's properties, shared resources to install motion lights, and practiced communication drills so that they could respond as a single unit if danger threatened again. The orchard, once a peaceful setting for Tessa's quiet life, had become a stronghold against intimidation. Tessa's pregnancy advanced, and within 2 weeks of the showdown, she went into labor in the early hours of a still, cool morning. Mark helped her into their truck, driving carefully over roads that neighbors had promised to watch. By the time they reached the small hospital in the county seat, Tessa's focus had narrowed entirely to the imminent arrival of their child. Hours later, a baby girl was born, Willow Holloway, named after the gentle creek that ran through the orchard. The nurses and doctors marveled at Tessa's calmness, even in labor, hinting at a resilience she had cultivated long ago. News spread quietly through the valley that the sharpshooter mama had welcomed a daughter into the world. Amid the relief and celebration, Tessa never forgot the reality that trouble could resurface. But for now, mother and child rested, and a sense of solidarity permeated the community. Judy and Paul brought flowers and notes from neighbors, each card expressing gratitude for Tessa and Mark's stance. Even Sheriff Turner stopped by to deliver updates on the gang's capture. Several members had been arrested near the county border. The ringleaders' finances were linked to outside criminal enterprises, and federal authorities had become involved. Days turned into weeks, and Little Willow thrived. Pleasant Valley enjoyed an unfamiliar sense of safety, bolstered by the knowledge that they had faced a real threat and won. Farms that had been on the brink of abandonment were once again planting new seeds. Barn raisings became communal events, with everyone lending a hand. Tessa, gently rocking Willow on the front porch, looked out over the orchard, where apples glowed a soft red in the sunshine. Mark sat beside her, sipping coffee. A breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the promise of a peaceful season ahead. "Think we can finally just be farmers now?" Mark asked with a wry smile. Tessa chuckled, gazing at their daughter's peaceful face. "I think we can try." She glanced at the corner of the porch where a chunk of wood still showed a bullet hole, a small reminder of what they'd been through. She knew that vigilance would always be part of her life, part of protecting what she loved. But she felt a deep serenity in this place, with these people who had learned to stand together. Judy and Paul arrived later that day to share dinner. In the orchard's fading light, the four of them discussed simpler things: upcoming harvests, plans for a county fair, dreams for Willow's future. The threat that had once loomed so large now felt like a chapter they had left behind, replaced by the kind of unity that comes only from facing fear and triumphing over it. For Tessa Holloway, once known as the Shadow of Kabul, this was a victory that surpassed all her previous accolades. She had discovered that a truly formidable defense doesn't always involve high-tech gear or specialized squads. Sometimes it's about the spirit of a community bound by trust, and a quiet mother who refuses to let intimidation take root. The orchard still stood, strong and fertile, and in the gentle hush of a Pleasant Valley evening, the aroma of apple blossoms drifted on the wind, carrying the echo of distant storms that would not soon return. In the end, Pleasant Valley transformed from a vulnerable farming community into a shining example of unity, courage, and resilience. Tessa and Mark proved that ordinary people, armed with determination and ingenuity, could protect everything they held dear. Their bravery inspired neighbors to stand strong together, ensuring their farms would thrive in peace for generations to come. What did you think about Tessa's incredible courage? Leave a comment below, share your thoughts, opinions, or similar stories you've experienced. We'd love to hear from you and discuss this amazing journey together.